Hey, Stephen Asma here. Today, Paul and I are coming at you with a good one. We're starting with your questions from our live Q&A. This is from our Seattle show, which was a real treat. And then we're heading into office hours where I'm giving a special lesson on all things demonic. So this is going to be about demons and the sort of history and culture around demons and really how you can, battle the creatures if you need to at some point. So this is a wild one. Let's get started. I think that it will be interesting in the Q&A if anybody has seen anything.
About to say. Yeah. And we generally open it up to a Q&A if people would like to ask questions.
Yeah.
And if anybody wants to, you don't have to. You really don't. Oops. Oh, dear. Here we go. Walking over there.
The first brave soul.
She's walking. She's still walking. Here we go. Oops, she's past the microphone. Well, there we go. No, you don't know. I really thought you were going to ditch. I thought you were just fucking with me and you were just going to ditch. I'm like, that was smart. That was a good move. Hi there. Can we hear? Yeah, go ahead.
Is this?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Brittany.
Hi.
I live in Seattle.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I grew up as a millennial watching Bill Nye the Science Guy.
Uh-huh.
And I also grew up.
That's right. He was out here, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember him. He was on that show. He was like, there was a show,
Yeah,
right?
there was a show.
There was a show, yeah.
You do not know the show?
What's that?
Do you not know the show?
I remember seeing it. What was it called?
Bill Nye the Science
No.
Guy.
No, it's not that easy to make me look like a fool. It's not that easy. No. I'm talking about when I lived here.
Oh, well.
Yeah.
Oh.
See? There was a show that was on, what was it called?
Oh, okay.
Well, almost gone.
I was
See,
new
I'm
at
old.
the time.
There was a thing called Almost Live, and he was on that.
Okay.
And that was before he was Bill Nye the Science Guy.
I'll have to check
Thank
that
you.
out.
So in your face, Brittany.
Jesus, Brittany.
Sorry. So I grew up also believing in ghosts. But recently, well, I don't know, past few years, he made a video, like an interview, where he was asked if he believes in ghosts, if ghosts are real. And I tend to like to side with him, but he said no, there's no chance that ghosts are real at all. So I was wondering if either one of you could make a case that ghosts are real for me.
You're kind of on board with ghosts more than I am.
So now you're going to put it all on me.
Step up and help Brittany
Well,
out.
I mean, it's a tough one because it's like I used to not believe in them at all, and I used to think of myself as a strict materialist, an atheist too, which I'm going to assume that Bill Nye probably is too.
Yeah, probably.
But I've had too many odd experiences. There's enough of them that I can sort of explain away and go, well, there's any number of explanations for that. And then there's some that I just can't. And sort of weird precognitive things, not necessarily ghosts, but things that have happened that then sort of ghosts can fall under the umbrella of these kind of weird things that I can't explain. They're too fucking weird for me to explain.
Yeah.
But it puts me in a position of, so I've had to go, well, I obviously can't be a strict materialist if I believe there's some sort of trace of something that's left behind. And it's a lot of the weird experiences that I had that seemed ghostly were often related to sort of electrical things. There were kinds of, or in places with the temperature things and things like that. These kind of physical things would happen that seemed to be related to what happened. I can't actually give you any actual explanation. I really can't, Brittany. I'm so sorry.
No, it's okay. It's okay.
No, but I can't really because
I think I'm fairly skeptical compared to you on the ghost thing.
You're very skeptical about ghosts. Yeah, you don't buy it all, really.
Well, but there is a way it could be true. Bill Nye is awesome, but he's also very confident about stuff that you can't entirely know to be true or not. There's a sort of gray area, and he just sort of pretends it doesn't exist. But it's possible that...
Wow, we took Bill Nye down. That's awesome.
I'm coming for you, Bill Nye. But until Darwin came along, And Darwin argued, look, the mind is an evolved thing, just like the pancreas or the tooth or anything else. So it's a product of the brain. And as a result of that, the mind and what we would call the soul or the spirit is basically contained in this sort of wet, substrate of the body. But for hundreds and thousands of years before Darwin came along, and I'm a Darwinian, I think he's right, people thought, actually, no, maybe the spirit is the real thing, and the body is some kind of manifestation of the spirit. That's kind of like an idealism thing. And if that's true, then ghosts make perfect sense, because they could exist outside of the body. So there's a way for you to have this idea that's not totally insane, but it's not a very popular view,
Got it.
There you go, Brittany.
There you go.
You're probably sorry you asked, aren't you?
I'm very. Thank you, guys.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? If anybody else. Oh, there we go. Hello, sir.
There we go.
Hi. Thanks, guys, for showing up.
Hi.
That was a great question. Speaking of materialism, and this is like the often skeptical thing about big apes walking around. Where's the fossil record?
Right.
Is that too skeptical for this show?
No.
No.
You point to me. Okay.
Yeah, because
all right.
that's an excellent point. What's your name, sir?
Hi, I'm Ian.
Ian. Thank you, Ian. Thank you.
Okay, so let me try to dig myself out of this hole, because I'm the guy who's pro Sasquatch. The fossil record is highly incomplete, my man. Highly incomplete. And what I would say is it's only a matter of time before we're filling in the Sasquatch. We're going to be like, there's Homo erectus, there's Neanderthals, there's, Homo sapiens, and there's going to be a little offshoot that's Sasquatch. We just haven't found that stuff yet, but it's coming.
Well, there's the thing I think a lot of these people say, cryptid enthusiasts say too, is well, they're burying them. We haven't found the graves
I
yet.
like it. They're burying.
That it's all buried. That it hasn't,
And then the bones are melting before they can become fossils.
That's true.
Yeah.
It's an excellent point. Is this gentleman? Hello, sir.
Hi there.
Hi there.
My name is Stephen. I'm from Brooklyn. I don't know if that's
Brooklyn.
Yeah, I live in Brooklyn.
We have a different way of looking at the world. They haven't really mapped how our minds work. They don't work the same.
People from Brooklyn.
People from Brooklyn. Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
So
It's true. People from Brooklyn are different. They're very different.
So I've got two things that are kind of intertwined. One is one that I can recall. The other I'm having memory issues with.
Okay.
The first one is a woman named Barbara Ehrenreich. I'm sure you've known of her books. And she was a very overt, quote unquote, practicing atheist. And she kept buried a very powerful spiritual experience she had when she was a teenager. And she finally, later in her life, realized she had to deal with it. And she came up with various, but it convinced her that she had changed from being an atheist to an agnostic, because something had happened there that was outside of these rationalist categories. Now, what that ties in with is, maybe some people here can help me, or you can help me. There's a writer, a very reputable writer, who had experiences with extraterrestrial encounters.
I'm going to guess maybe you mean Whitley Strieber.
Whitley Strieber.
Yeah. That's the guy.
Yeah, I'm going to guess that's who you mean. Yeah, I'm going to guess that's who you mean.
And I put him in the same category as Barbara Ehrenreich.
I agree with you. I mean, his stuff is fascinating. And it's interesting. I haven't read the Barbara Ehrenreich thing. I vaguely remember hearing about that.
Yeah.
But, his books actually, they're kind of amazing. And you're right. I mean, I've read 2 or 3 of them. And they have almost the quality of a spiritual autobiography.
That's right.
A kind of dark night of the soul sort of thing.
Communion might be the most
Communion is the
That
most
was
famous
his book,
one.
Communion.
Communion is
where
the
he
famous
says
one. I can't remember what the other ones are called.
Where the alien tells him,
Yeah,
this
yeah,
is
yeah.
about communion.
Yeah, and it's deep, and a lot of the sort of things that happen to him have analogs in other sort of spiritual biographies or autobiographies.
Right.
You read of other people. There's a kind of spiritual terror to these things. That's a really kind of meaningful part of Revelation in some ways. It's terrifying.
They're not
you read
sweet.
about a
They're
lot
not
of these.
sweet.
What? No, they're not.
They're
sweet.
not sweet
it's
at
not
all.
Sweet, and
They're
it's not,
terrifying.
Yeah, it's scary. And
What happened to the Buddha? The night of his enlightenment was terrifying.
That's right.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole
Satori and
universe,
all those things are
universe
terrifying.
attacked him, or the negative aspects attacked him. and he turned the arrows into flowers.
Yes.
You know, I mean, it wasn't, oh, it's going to be okay, you know. It was never going to be okay, you know.
No, it's not true, though. No,
I spent his whole life teaching people it's not going to be okay. You're going to have to work your ass off.
You're really bringing us down.
They want
No.
Yeah. They once asked this.
I was reading something recently, because this is the kind of thing I sit around reading about. I was reading about a priest in the 17th century who levitated all the time. And the interesting thing about many accounts of this guy levitating was that he didn't want it to happen.
Yeah.
That it was scary as hell to him.
Yeah.
And it was almost like a kind of fit that he would have.
That's right.
And then he would levitate. So it wasn't this kind of flying, this kind of, it was terrifying in some ways. And so there's something to that I think is interesting.
There is a kind of there is a tradition, I think, in if you look at Hinduism, you look at the Bhagavad Gita, when you get to see the face of God, it blows your tiny mind, and it's terrifying.
Yeah.
And it's this idea of the sublime.
Right.
But we have this idea in religion of like, it's almost like a toxic positivity, like you should feel good all the time, and it's going to be beautiful and sweet. But really, the history of religion is filled with this holy terror.
Yeah.
It's a good point. All right, thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
man.
you.
Thanks a lot. Leave it to the guy from Brooklyn to get real with shit. It's true, man. Absolutely. Hi.
Hi.
Good evening. My name is Todd. Just wanted to say thank you so much for coming up to Seattle.
Pleasure.
And I also wanted to say how honored I am to be in the presence of our fellow King Neptunian of Neptune. And so
I forgot about that.
And so I pledge.
Bow down.
He pledges his fealty.
Bow down.
My fealty to you.
Thank you. I forgot about that. Very
And
good.
so, as any royal subject
Thanks.
would, I bring gifts for you.
Holy cow.
So you have your own
Is that a
crown.
Is that a crown?
Here. And if any,
Goddamn
I'll
right.
Put this, I'll put this here for
Thank
you.
you.
Dude, bring the crown over here. Fucking keep the crown over there. Bring me that crown, man. Wow, that's nice, man. Thanks. Thanks, man.
And if anybody knows of the Mariners here, they have a trident, right? I probably would have been checked at the door and never been able to get in.
Nice.
Thanks, man.
Looking good, man.
Thanks a
Looking
lot,
good.
brother. Thanks, man.
Hi, I'm Lynn.
Hi, Lynn.
I'm going to bring it back to the sea creatures now that you got your crown on
Thank
and
you.
your medallion. Have you done a show or talked about mermaids, mermen? Where
That's
do you stand
interesting.
on that?
Yeah.
It's a great topic.
It is a great topic. No, we haven't really. I don't know much about mermaids.
There are some biologically based theories about like manatees and sea cows.
Oh, really?
Looking
that
like
it's sort of mistaken for mermaids.
yes, because men at sea for a long time maybe
Well, that's desperate,
are
isn't it?
thinking, but
They got aroused
Oh, my
by a
God.
manatee? Is that what you're saying?
that's hard times.
it's a theory.
guess so.
A theory.
Yes.
Wow.
Well,
No,
maybe
that's
it's a
true.
future topic.
Yeah, that's a great topic, and we have talked about like
Interesting.
doing an episode on mermaids. And I think you're right. The tradition is that they were kind of scary, just sort of like what we were talking about before.
Again, yeah.
But Disney has made them like beautiful, and I suppose Hans Christian Andersen did this too.
No, it's a scary story.
It is a
actually.
scary
that
story,
story
yes.
is disturbing, actually.
Yeah.
But what's the whole? Don't they sort of sing to lure? Is that mermaids?
Well, sirens.
That's a siren.
Yeah,
The same
sirens.
thing?
Yeah.
Is the siren the same thing?
Siren.
But I liked your theory on the
Get people in.
Sasquatch of being this hybrid, and that's another theory of sort of a sea creature and a land person.
Yeah, it's
coming together.
a good point. Like oftentimes, we were talking about this earlier too. Oftentimes, the monster is a combination of two zoological categories. It's like two different animals blended together. And mermaids are perfect examples because you've got a person on the top and a fish on the bottom. And we were thinking about the chimera from the Greek tradition, which is like three things. It's
At
like
least it's 3 or 4 things.
tiger,
a
snake,
lion, a serpent,
yeah, lion,
a
snake, and a
goat
goat
or
sticking out of
something.
its back.
Yeah.
And we were wondering, like, most of the monsters are like two different creatures stuck together. But what happens when you add like 3 and 4 and that kind
It
of
suddenly
thing?
seems silly when you add too many elements to it.
Suddenly.
Yeah.
Not
But that's-
before that.
No, that'd be a very interesting topic. Is there things like silkies and stuff like that?
Yeah.
Is that all the same
That's
thing?
the seal woman. The I think Irish maybe.
Something
yeah.
Irish,
Yeah.
Ireland, or Scotland.
And the Selkies are horses that swim in the water.
Oh, is that
in
right?
Scotland?
Oh.
I thought it was like a seal and a person.
Yeah, no, that's something else. The horse, that's something else. I can't remember what that's called. What?
Somebody's gonna. What is it? Kelpie.
Kelpie.
Thank you.
Yep.
Kelpie.
Amazing. Look at this.
There's so many.
Yeah, so amazing. No, awesome. I think that's something we would like to do, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's a great
thank
topic.
you.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thank you. Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name's Rana, and I'm really mad now, Stephen, because first you stole my hodag. I was going to come and talk to you
That
about
sounds
those.
like a euphemism
And then-
for
You
something.
my hodag.
And now I was coming up after her to say the Selkies in Ireland.
Okay.
And now I have nothing left to say.
Well,
but I,
all right.
do you know more about the Selkies?
Pardon?
Do you know
Yeah.
more about the Selkies?
well, I know when I was in Scotland, because my name's Rana, they said they use that name also for them, but I didn't
Oh,
quite
really?
understand. Yeah.
That's another word for selkie.
Yeah.
A rana.
Yeah, Rana, or the seals too, because I was walking around an island in the Outer Hebrides, and there was a seal that followed me around the island. It was a very
Really?
small island that I walked around, and the seal and I sang to it, and it
Amazing.
was
Were you
interested.
Drinking a
and-
lot of scotch. I was in Scotland not too long ago, and where I was staying, there were seals that would come up in this little
Yeah.
sort of area.
Yeah, they're very
and
friendly.
they're creepy.
They are creepy.
They come out of the water and they look at you in the
They're
eye like,
fucking creepy.
"What's up?"
Black eyes.
They're really
Yeah.
creepy.
Black eyes.
They're
Yeah, black eyes,
eyes. Oh my God. The most uncanny. I was in Hawaii once, and I was out in the water. I'm in Hawaii. Everything's great. And I can feel these things, suddenly these bodies around me.
Oh, my God.
And then I'm aware of these two things on either side of me. And on either side of me were these goddamn seals who were just like, on either side of me. And they're very uncanny and
Yeah,
strange.
they're
But they're really bold. They have
Yeah.
no sort of problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're strange. Very strange.
So that's your King Neptune thing. I have a gift for you also.
That's more like it. People should be paying tribute to me. All right. Thank you very much. That's more like it.
Thank you.
This is beautiful. What is this? It's a nice pin, a nice book. Thank you.
I do think, though, like, just to finish that question, is that there's a kind of, there's something weird about the cetaceans. You know, they look humanoid.
Is that dolphins and and
because they're
whales?
mammals. I mean, all the cetaceans are really
They have
closer
the
to cows.
bone
Yeah.
structure, hands. And
Even
stuff like
even whales have like hand bones
That's what I
in their
mean, yeah.
flippers.
Yeah, yeah,
because
yeah.
they evolved back into the water.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think
They
that
seem
must have been
alien.
difficult.
They seem
for-
really alien.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hi.
Hi, my name is Jose Daniel Tamayo. I'm from Mexico, but I've been living here in the Northwest for the past 12 years.
Awesome.
First of all, I want to thank you both because you have no need to be doing this. So,
No, we don't.
for,
We really don't.
No reason.
There's no
to
need.
do it.
There's no reason.
so there. So thank you for being brave.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you also for just having fun.
No,
and just
right.
be motivated just to enjoy and
Thanks.
and
I hope
share
you
that
guys
with the
have fun.
body, which
Yeah.
it is important. You can feel that you guys get along really well and you have fun.
Thank you.
Not really.
That's very kind. Thank you.
Thank
Yes.
you very much.
It's true.
Uncle. Thank you.
That being said,
Here we go. Here we go.
being from Mexico, I'm a big fan of Guillermo del Toro's work, and I know that he's kind of an authority on monsters. And I would really love if you guys could get a way to get him
Yes.
We
to
just
your
were talking
program,
about that.
because you could really, really get into that. I grew up with the chupacabras kind
Yeah.
of thing,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
those are the two things that kind of asking you
Great.
to look into.
Get Guillermo del Toro and a chupacabra.
And the
Yeah.
chupacabra together.
Okay.
In that order. In
All
that
right,
order.
cool. Yeah,
That's
Guillermo
great,
del
thank you.
Toro would be great. We would love to do
We were
that.
just talking about
Yeah, we were
trying to
just
get
talking
him
about
on
him.
the show, yeah.
Yes, but he would have to be very brave as well to come and do this with us, wouldn't he? But he would be great to have. Thank you very
Yeah,
much
thank
for
you.
that. Actually, thank you, and thanks to everybody.
Yeah.
It was really awesome. I hope you guys had fun. Thanks a lot, guys.
Stay tuned for more Chinwag. All right, welcome, Chinwaggers, or Wagoneers, or whatever we're calling ourselves now. Welcome to another episode of Office Hours with yours truly, Professor Stephen Asma. And as you know, we have on occasion discussed in the Chinwag demons and Satan and witches and witchcraft and black magic and this kind of thing. I thought today what I would do is give you a brief kind of guidebook, as it were, of demon hunting. And you might be thinking, oh, hey, I know what I'm doing. I've seen The Exorcist or, Rosemary's Baby or whatever it is. But no, I'm going to actually give you a little taste of the original demon hunters, what their sort of philosophy was, what their insight and their sort of advice was. And this comes really out of the medieval period, sort of the early medieval all the way to the Renaissance and up to the present. And a lot of their ideas have informed the way we think about demons. So we need to up our game. We need real advice from history's best demon hunters. And I'm going to give you just a sort of a glimpse into what these saints have been saying and doing. I mean, they've basically been taking out the trash for, over 1,000 years. And I think it's time you had some of their mojo. So let's start out with St. Anthony of the Desert. St. Anthony basically started out as kind of a rich kid, but when his parents died, he wanted to prove himself, his virtue, and so he left the city and began to live in a tomb in the desert. And then he eventually, after he lived there for a long time, he started to have other people come there, and they sort of started becoming a monk community. And so he's the father of monasticism. But he believed that there was a multitude of demons who were coming and visiting him every night, and they would sort of slice him into a bloody mess. And then he would wake up the next day and he would be whole again. And he'd be fine all day, he'd be praying and so forth, but then the demons would come back at night. And so we have like a record of St. Anthony's struggle with the demons. Most of the demons, Anthony assures us, they have no real power in the physical world. Here's a sort of a quick little quote from his biography. He says, "Changes of form and evil are easy for the devil. So in the night, they make such a din that the whole of that place seemed to be shaken by an earthquake, and the demons, as if breaking the four walls of the dwelling, seemed to enter through them, coming in the likeness of beasts and creeping things." And as I said, these basically were kind of hallucinations, he thought. He didn't know if they were real or not, and eventually he basically decided they're a kind of hallucination, but if you believe in them too much, that gives them power to enter the world, and that's what allows them to actually cut you and mess you up. So if we can just treat them as if they are very potent, and convincing hallucinations, we can keep them from entering into the world. But he also realized that sometimes they can possess human beings. And when that happens, he says you have to sort of struggle, in a more intense way. So he describes a man named Fronto, and Fronto had a madness that involved biting his own tongue and injuring his own eyes. And he also describes a woman from Bucyrus who had mucus fall from her nose, and this mucus would immediately turn into worms once it hit the ground. And then, to quote him, he says, "Another, a person of rank, came to me, possessed by a demon, and he even ate the excreta from his own body," end quote. In other words, this guy's eating his own shit. And the young man actually attacked Anthony, but Anthony said to him, quote, "Be not angry with the young man, for it is not he, but the demon which is in him." So there's a kind of tolerance for such aberrant behavior because it's not the person but the sort of evil power that's working through them. And he finally says, demons do not have real power unless you become afraid of them, and in that case, you grant them entry into this cause and effect world. And this is followed in 354 by the writings of St. Augustine. So many of you have heard of Augustine if you're Christian or Catholic. You will have heard of St. Augustine of Hippo. He dies in 430 Common Era. He's from Algeria. And Augustine basically talks about, demons in his really huge book called The City of God. And he says, look, there are demons from the ancient world that Socrates talked about, and sometimes we call those daemons, which is almost like hearing a voice in your head. So famously, Socrates, who lived, many hundreds of years before Augustine, he would be seen to sort of stand still all of a sudden. He'd be walking through the forum or whatever, and it was almost like he was possessed. And he would be sort of in a trance state. This could last for hours. And his friends would be like, well, what can we do? Let's go drinking, and he'll join us later. And sure enough, Socrates would come along a few hours later, and he'd say, oh, I was talking to my daemon, or I was, talking to the spirit within me. And Augustine looks at this in the ancient world, and he says, well, these pagans, they were aware of angels and demons, but they didn't know what they were because they were stuck in their own pagan theology. Augustine says, we monotheists, who have the one God, we know that there's really just angels and demons. And so he says, we need to sort of understand what the demons are really about. And so Augustine says, we need to understand the psychology of a demon. And he says, knowledge puffeth up, this is a quote, knowledge puffeth up, but charity buildeth up. So he says the demons actually have knowledge of the world, but they have no sense of charity. And that means their knowledge is kind of sterile. They don't have any empathy or compassion for others. And that's what makes them get filled with what Augustine thinks is the worst sin ever, which is pride. And that's what makes demons especially dangerous. So he instructs us about the imperfect minds of the demons. But then the funny thing is, he also describes what their bodies are like. He says their bodies are very strange. We oftentimes think, oh, they have a lot of power, and they do, because they can become invisible, they can float, they can fly. He says they do shape-shifting, and they can even pass through walls. And he says, look, lots of animals, too, have greater bodily powers of strength. You think about elephants, tigers, they're much more powerful than human beings. So he says it's just the way that God sort of create the whole diversity of the natural world. And he says our important faculties for humans are rationality and virtue. Okay, demons have really impressive magical bodies, Augustine says, but, quote, divine providence gave to them bodies of a better quality than ours, that in which we excel them might in this way be commended to us, deserving to be far more cared for than the body, and that we should learn to despise the bodily, end quote. So Augustine has this kind of negative view of the body, and he says, even if you've got a magical demon body, it's better to have reason and virtue, because that's how you're going to get to heaven. All right, then we fast forward almost 1,000 years, and we get Thomas Aquinas. St. Thomas Aquinas, many people have heard of Aquinas. He also had some very distinct ideas about demons and how to deal with them. And so in his book, Summa Contra Gentiles, Aquinas considers whether demons are inherently evil. Now, we think of demons as being evil, and Aquinas says, well, that can't be right if you think about it, because God made everything, including the demons, because there's nothing that God didn't make. And if everything God made is good, as we're told in Genesis, which is basically, quote, God saw all things that he had made and they were very good, end quote, that's Genesis 1. That means that demons cannot be intrinsically evil, because then God would have made something intrinsically evil. So Aquinas does this sort of incredibly ingenious Jedi mind trick where he says, okay, they're not intrinsically evil, they're just really confused. So he says, all beings like us are making judgments and decisions, and then we act on those. And the problem with demons is that they're making bad decisions. They think they're doing good, but they're actually doing bad indirectly. So here's an example. Imagine you're late for an important event, and you're pushing a crowd of people in the street to get to your destination. Now imagine some of these people are injured in the scuffle. Their suffering is not your intended goal or motivation. Their suffering is sort of an unfortunate, I guess it's like an unintended consequence, because you're just like overly zealous trying to get to someplace on time. So you're not guilty of knowingly and willfully hurting other people, but you are guilty of being careless and thoughtless. And this is basically what it's like for the demon, according to Aquinas. He says they just don't know any better. They basically are confused and weak-willed, and they're accidentally evil. They're not sort of essentially evil. That is a very interesting view of demons, and I think it's one that most people aren't aware of. He says they make false judgments. It's almost like, imagine if you thought heroin might be good for your kids. It's hard to imagine, but your psychology would just be so confused. You'd be like, oh, I should give heroin to the kids now. Or maybe you think hemlock would make a good snack. And, we know the hemlock is poison. You wouldn't be sort of hurting somebody sort of intentionally. It would be unintentional. And he thinks this is rare and strange, but that's basically what happens with demons. Their big problem is they have too much pride and they're confused about what the good is. So that sort of gets them off the hook a little bit. Although one thing that Aquinas and these people never really thought about in the medieval period was, what about sadists? What about sort of people who want to hurt you? And we now sort of living, in the modern world, think that sadism is actually maybe not common, but common enough for us to have a theory about it. Aquinas never really seriously entertains the idea that, making someone miserable, torturing a human, is the actual pleasurable end goal of a demon's activity. He doesn't even really consider that. And I think that just shows you that the medieval mind really didn't know maybe how awful people could be. All right, then lastly, there's a wonderful, and I say wonderful here in scare quotes because he was kind of a torturer, but he was a very influential thinker and sort of practitioner in the Inquisition, and that is the German Inquisitor named Heinrich Kramer, sometimes known by his Latin name Instatorus. And this was probably the most famous witch hunter and demon hunter of the sort of late medieval and early Renaissance period. In 1484, Pope Innocent VIII gave this Dominican inquisitor, Heinrich Kramer, wide-ranging legal powers to pursue and eradicate witches. He basically wrote this papal bull, which said, you can basically try to torture people to get them to confess to their witchcraft and to being in cahoots with the demons. And that hunting guide, that demon hunting guide, it was called Malleus Maleficarum, which is Latin for the hammer of evil, or the hammer of the witches. This document argued sort of for a middle way between witchcraft that's too real, where it's like pure evil. We can't have that because God, as I just said before, if God's made everything, he can't have made something purely evil. But it's also not taking the view that Augustine had, or that St. Anthony had, which is that evil is all a kind of hallucination. The Malleus Maleficarum argues that actually there are demons that are sort of waiting in the wings like a hallucination, but once you let them into the world, they can do truly awful things. And so the goal of the church was to hunt them down in the form of witches and to sort of exorcise them or destroy them. And so Instatorus breaks with this sort of more benign version of witchcraft, but he offers this clever way to get demons back in their threatening position. He says works of evil they're not just like indigestion, where they just are just hallucinations. They're real and they're happening in the external world. So children really are being eaten by demonic werewolves, and witches are actually taking flight. But how's it done if only God has true creative power? It may seem like demons and their witches conjure monsters and terrors from the thin air, but they do not really create in such an absolute manner. Instead, the demons have an amazing understanding of the book of nature. So here's what he's thinking. Remember, this is sort of before chemistry. And you've got a whole school of practitioners called alchemists working in late medieval and early Renaissance societies. And they're sort of breaking down substances and trying to find gold and turn base metals into gold and other stuff. And he says some of these people go like to the dark side, and they use this knowledge of nature to sort of create chaos. And so inside everything, like let's say it's an apple, are the seeds of every other substance. So the witches and the demons basically have learned to find the seeds of like a cow or a person, and then they can manipulate those seeds to grow that cow or person out of the apple. I know this sounds nuts, but this was their view of how nature was structured. It was like a microcosm of the macrocosm. So the sort of demonologist has to go in and basically find these people and stop them from doing this kind of dark science, the sort of dark alchemy that was what they thought was sort of abundant in those days. And so he says, one thing that can happen is that when you've got a case of possession, you've got to sort of perform an exorcism. And Inquisitor, or Heinrich Kramer, if you like, basically says, here's what you do if you have to do an exorcism. He says, it's best if a cleric performs the function, so basically a priest or a monk or a nun, but anybody of good character can do it if necessary. So first, you make the sort of afflicted person give a confession. So let's say you've got somebody who's acting very strangely and doing evil things. First, you make them give a confession. Next, you got to do a careful search of their home. So you're trying to detect if there's any magical implements like amulets and effigies. And he says, you got to burn those right away. Then he says it's important to get this person like into a church as quickly as possible. Then make them hold a candle, a blessed candle, and then have sort of righteous witnesses pray over this person. Then this should sort of happen 3 times a week to restore grace. And the victim should receive the Holy Sacrament. And if that doesn't fix it, like in really stubborn cases, you should write the beginning phrases of John's Gospel on a tablet and hang it around the person's neck. Then holy water should be applied liberally. You got to sprinkle the holy water. And if exorcism sort of fails, that could be that it could mean that the person really, God wants them to be punished. And you have to surrender that person to these afflictions. Or it could mean that, the person who's doing the exorcism, their faith isn't strong enough. So you should start over again with a new exorcist. I'm not sure like when you actually throw in the towel and say, okay, they're done for. But okay, that's just a kind of tour of what actually the church fathers were saying about how to deal with demons. And I think it's fun because you rarely see this. Of course, we see movies and we read novels all the time, but it's really fun to see what the actual official monks and priests and clerics were saying about all this. When you're sort of stuck, the ultimate weapon of the, in the demon hunting arsenal is, according to these guys, is prayer, fasting, and faith. Luckily, we've got new armaments, these days. We have antipsychotic drugs that help people who are suffering from illnesses and schizophrenia. And one can only imagine that a lot of stuff that was originally thought to be, possession may well have been just mental illness. And so thank God we live in an era now where we understand this. But I thought you would at least want to know about the history of demonology. So that's enough for today's office hours. Go forth in righteousness, fight the demons where you can, and of course, as usual, wag on weirdos. Chinwag is a production of Treefort Media and Touchy Feely Films, hosted and executive produced by Paul Giamatti and Stephen Asma. Executive producers for Treefort are Kelly Garner and Lisa Ammerman. Dan Carey is executive producer for Touchy Feely. Our series producer is Rachel Whitley Bernstein, with additional producing by Mary Chulenza. Original theme music by Luke Topp, with additional music by Via Mardot. Oscar Guido is our executive in charge of production. Tom Monahan is head of audio for Treefort. Our associate producer is Aidan Brooks. Audio production supervision by Jared Brom and Matt Dyson. Editing and mixing by Jared Brom. Lastly, for more information, go to chinwagpod.fm and find us on Instagram or TikTok at chinwagpod or on Twitter at chinwag_pod.